Greetings, beloved. I'm Dr. Felicia LaBoy, lead pastor and life coach here at the historic First United Methodist Church in downtown Elgin, Illinois, with another motivational moment from the Bible. These motivational moments are designed to help you take what you hear in church on Sunday, what you may read during your private devotional time, what you may see online during a worship service, to take those biblical concepts and to make them a part of your everyday life. If you've been joining along with us, you know that we are in the middle of our stewardship campaign. This whole idea that all of our gifts, especially our financial gifts, come from God. That we're not owners, we are managers or stewards of the gifts that God gives us. And so we take time to say to God, this is what we are going to pledge so that we can prepare for the ministries that you have for us for the upcoming year. We're doing our series around Adam Hamilton's book, Enough. The whole idea of this book is that we should learn to be content, especially in a world that makes us think that we shouldn't be content, right? That we need to keep up with the Joneses or whoever it should be, right? That we're not pretty enough or thin enough or don't have enough or all of those things. And so I love this saying of this picture that's beside me. It says, Christian contentment is the direct fruit of having no higher ambition than to belong to the Lord and to be entirely at his disposal. It's a wonderful next step from our dynamite prayer process, right? And our passage comes from 2 Corinthians 12. And this is a familiar passage. I'm just reading this from the Message Bible. And I want to invite you to go back to 2 Corinthians 12 and read it in a version that's familiar to you. But anyway, in this passage, the Apostle Paul is praying and asking God to relieve him of something that he's suffering from. He has a physical ailment. And he's prayed and asked God, please heal me of this. 3 times he's asked God. Lord, I serve you. Please take this away from me. Please, God, take this away from me. And then Paul begins to realize that the Lord has allowed this thing in his life because without it, Paul wouldn't be dependent on God. That God uses Paul in such a mighty way that Paul begins to see that it's this weakness that keeps him dependent on God. That if that weakness wasn't there, that Paul doesn't know that he wouldn't be going to God as much. And so Paul says, listen, I didn't think of this ailment as a gift. I thought of it as a weakness, as a hindrance, as an ailment. Until God told him, my grace is sufficient. My grace is enough for you. It's all that you need. And my strength is what shows up in your weakness. And he says, once I heard that, I was all right. I was glad to let it happen. I was okay to stop focusing on my handicap. And I was able to see that in spite of my weakness, God was able to do something through that. Beloved, I want to invite you to see where God is moving through your weaknesses. You know, it's funny. A couple weeks ago, I received a copy of a book that I had written an article for. And I had to laugh as I recalled some, I guess now 20 plus years ago, as I began my doctoral program, I decided that I would, in preparation for that, that I would see if I could get into a program for writing for pastors. And I remember in that program, one of very few women and women of color in that program, that a famous pastor, female herself, told me that I was a remedial writer and basically suggested that I would never be able to write and definitely not be able to publish and all of those other things. And I had to laugh when I saw, here an article printed, published by a real publishing house, and part of a collection of things that God had allowed, but knowing too how much prayer had gone behind those things, how much I had to depend on God, how much I had to give God glory for what he had done. Remember that as a kid, I had and still have a lisp. and how I had to be pulled out of class several times a week to go to the speech therapist, and how that made me afraid to talk. And so thought it was funny that when I finally got a job where I had to speak, and so I went to the Dale Carnegie class and the Toastmasters so that I would learn to speak in front of people, never thinking that I would be a pastor. And so every Sunday, still petrified to stand in front of folks, and um, every Sunday before I get up to preach, pray, Lord, please, I need your help. I can't do this. Please get me out of your way because I can't. And I see how God moves through that in spite of me. Beloved, I promise you, I'm not saying that there aren't some weaknesses that we need to deal with, but I am telling you that if we turn our weaknesses over to God, God is not hindered or hampered by our weaknesses, but God can surely move through them. I think that the biggest mistake of our life is, I'm not saying that we shouldn't deal with our weaknesses, but I do know that all of our strengths come with a shadow side. And I do know that there's some weaknesses that we can do something about and some that we can't. But I bet if you look at your life, you will see that you have a lot more strengths, a lot more blessings, that God, in spite of your weaknesses, is still in the blessing business and still doing great things to and through and with and for you. There's lots of reasons to be content. No, you may not be the size that you want to be. No, you may not be able to do all that your neighbor can do. You may not have all that your brother has. You may not be as strong as you used to be. But, beloved, is it possible that God has you in that position because He wants you to learn to depend on Him so that He might have more access to you so that He can flow through you? That's what I'm finding. That God keeps putting me in position where I can't do anything, that my intellect, my ability, my experience, that may get me in a room, but it won't help me with the things I got to do, so that He might get the glory, not me. That He might get the glory of what can and should be done. Beloved, that's what it's all about. We have reason to be content because our names are written in the Lamb's book of life, and everything else is gravy. We have reasons to be content for all that God is doing with and through us, because God is good. I pray you'll stick around for this week's Refresh Your Soul moment. It is Chris Tomlin's Gifts from God, which are many. And remember, His grace is sufficient for us. It's all we need. His strength comes through and into its own through our weaknesses. Beloved, I am Dr. Felicia LaBoy, lead pastor and life coach here at the historic First United Methodist Church in downtown Elgin, Illinois. Be blessed, and I'll see you here next week.